Mike and one for Jerry. Mike, could you maybe elaborate a little bit what your statistics and polling is showing in terms of, for those who support trade, what are the reasons that they give? I mean, the typical ones that one hears, it creates jobs, cheaper goods, there's foreign policy aspect to it, of course, that was emphasized a lot in TPP. Can you say anything about, for those who support it, which of those or maybe some other factors are the most important? And for Jerry, I want to drill down a little bit on that very important aspect of tax. I wonder if you could maybe give us your forecast about whether we're going to actually be looking at sort of a classic VAT system in the United States. Is that where Ryan and Brady are going? Is it not only that the taxes would be rebated on exports, but what about some additional taxes paid on imports coming in, like in a classical VAT system?
I think if you look at kind of the broader reasons for supporting trade, I think it's hard to generalize at a national population level. I think it's more important to kind of look at these subpopulations. So, like was mentioned before, the point about kind of where younger millennial audiences are, I think it has more to do about the connectivity. I think that they're used to having access to pieces of information and decision making, whether it's purchasing of goods or services. I think it's the connectivity issue that they view as kind of something I think they take for granted. If it's kind of the Gen X to older populations that do support trade, I think it has more of a consumerism angle. I don't think anyone necessarily has seen it as a net job producer. I don't know if that's been the piece that the American public's taken away. I can definitely follow with kind of the full presentation. There's about 75 slides that went into that entire 10,000 person poll. But I think what we see more than anything is that there's not necessarily a single reason. And I think that's the hardest challenge, is that you can't win on a silver bullet. Whereas if you're an opponent of trade or the expansion of trade, you're going to harp on jobs and you're going to look for specific case examples that reinforce that one message. And so, anytime you're in a political environment, and it's easier to run on one issue than it is to run on 7 issues. So I think Trump found that himself, that it was something he could always pivot back to, that he thought resonated with this population. And so I think from that perspective, the data probably tells you that it's not going to be an easy fight. You're going to have to fight each one of these across the board with each population. It's going to need to be more targeted. That was kind of the point I was trying to make before, is that it's not a national ad campaign. It's not an ad campaign on Meet the Press. Like, it's a much longer fight across a much wider terrain.
Well, is this on? Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. I don't hear it up here, I guess. This has been a great conversation. And, the one part is, a lot of times perception and how you name trade agreements. We've gone through that transformation over the last 30 years from NAFTA. We were debating CAFTA. We were always saying, why did they have to have it rhyme with NAFTA? Why didn't we come up with a new name? So maybe the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we should call it the really big Pacific deal. Something that would appeal to, where it's going to be huge for President Trump. The huge Pacific deal that President Trump will negotiate. Maybe that's a better way of going about it, to build support within the administration. You look at the agenda that Congress and the new president are going to be looking at, and two of the 3 areas, I think the trade community can be looking forward with anticipation. Tax reform is going to help position U.S. companies to be much more competitive in the global marketplace by removing U.S. corporate taxes from the cost of a product that is being exported, which allows us to compete with the VAT countries, and it'll be W-2 compliant. I would really urge the WIDA to actually have a forum bring in tax reform, because it's a very long, detailed conversation. Walk through that conversation. I would go to to Paul Ryan's website, look at the blueprint, because that's really going to be the basis of what President Trump and the House Republicans will be driving, and with the hope that Chairman Hatch goes along with it. The reason I think that there's a tremendous opportunity to do a deal on tax reform is, you may recall when then Chairman Ryan of Ways and Means and then Senator Schumer were negotiating, trying to reach an agreement on a bipartisan international tax reform component just to deal with the international portion of the tax code was. At that time, Congress was trying to figure out a way to pay for infrastructure in the highway bill. And of course, Schumer wanted to do a robust bill. And I think he was talking $800 million as the definition of robust. And us Republicans were more along the line of doing something less, a few hundred million. President Trump, elect Trump, has, getting used to that, has called for $1 trillion infrastructure package. And that includes not just roads and bridges, but ports, making sure that every port in America is post-Panamax capable. There's really the makings of a really big deal when it comes to tax reform and infrastructure very early in the new administration and with the new Congress in the coming year. Obviously, you have good infrastructure, reduce costs, and you rebuild the locks and dams on the Illinois Michigan waterways, which was always a passion of mine for 30 years, and they still have another 50 years in the current timetable to get those locks and dams upgraded. Getting those in place will greatly reduce the cost of Midwestern manufactured and agricultural products, helping make them be much more competitive in the global marketplace. So, infrastructure tax reform is part of a competitive deal. My friend with the Indiana is absolutely right. Pro-trade Republicans should be seeking opportunities to be part of the Trump administration, not just at STR, but also elsewhere, whether USDA or at Department of Commerce, keeping that voice going forward. I was a Marco Rubio guy during the campaign. I see him as the future, and I know the Democrats feared him the most. But the thing is, we have a guy that's been elected president. He needs good talent to work for him. We certainly want to encourage every Republican who believes in free trade to apply for a position in the Trump administration.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing on the
And then
demography?
one last question.
On the demography piece is that one of the reasons that Democrats are so pro-trade is that immigrants, we have historically high levels of immigrants in the United States, and immigrants tend to be very much for American engagement in the world and are pro-trade. Hispanics are the most pro-trade sub-demographic of any ethnic group in the country, because many of them want to keep the U.S. to keep connected to the places they came from, right? So that's a source of opportunity for all of us.
Excellent points. This is a conversation we can carry on all morning and still have much to talk about. There's time for one more question. Is there someone in the back? I see two people with hands up. I don't know if they have similar questions. Why don't you stand up and ask your question? Just state your question in one sentence. If you can state your question in one sentence, Don, and then the woman state your question in one sentence. We'll see if we can't tackle them both with the final round of our panelists.
Oh, okay. My question is, I work with the smaller countries, they're not African emerging markets, developing countries. What do you think will happen to them in terms of free trade agreements, trade preferences in this administration? Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Don Phillips, American Sugar Lines. Bill, you mentioned renegotiating terms of trade with China. I wanted to get an idea of specifically what you have in mind. I might add another one. What do you all think of the suggestion by Senator Hatch yesterday that we might do an FTA with Japan as opposed to pursuing TPP?
Okay, so several questions on the table. Now we're going to call it sort of like a round robin. Give each one of our panelists a chance to state a brief reply. Who would like to go first? Congressman Muller?
I'm holding the microphone.
Pick whichever one you want.
Africa. From a geopolitical standpoint, Africa, 1 out of 4 people on the planet by the year 2030 will be living in Africa. So from economic standpoint, Africa will become increasingly important. If you look at the demographics, it's a young society. So increasingly over time, eventually 1 out of 3 people living on the planet will be living in Africa. So there's an incredible opportunity, incredible marketplace, and frankly, from a geopolitical standpoint, it's a place the United States should be front and center and engaged. AGOA is 9 years left? So that's going to be extremely important. And for those of us who are always advocates of initiatives such as AGOA, our goal always was at the end of that was to have a resulting regional trade agreement with our African partners as they mature in their capabilities. My hope is that the Congress and some of the champions of AGOA, as you know, are retiring this cycle. We need to recruit new ones. One suggestion I really want to make for all of us here in the trade community, I think we as a coalition need to make it a priority early to go around and meet with the new members of Congress and ascertain where they are on trade. Just to get a
Good
sense of
suggestion.
that.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
I'm going to keep it brief because I think there's more points to the larger questions from other panelists. But I would just echo the last piece about it from an education standpoint. We've built out 50 state breakdowns for all of this trade data, so you can actually look at it state by state. So if you're walking into member offices and you want to be able to provide constituent level data, you can talk to them about their constituents. I think the one thing I think is wrong in the polling and media space is that everyone likes to produce a lot of headline polls. They like to talk about it at national level, but it has almost no value to the individual member or to the senator. We produce almost all of our large-scale polling at the 10 and 20,000 person poll level. That allows us to break it down district by district, state by state. So you can walk in with member-specific data, and it's easier to have a conversation than what I think is easily dismissed by members as, I know my constituents better than that national poll. This is a way for you to engage on issues like trade and be able to walk in with state-specific or district-specific data.
China, Japan, just one quick comment. China, my main focus here is we don't have to demagogue or we don't have to demonize China. China knows it doesn't need, with the trade surplus that it has, it doesn't need double-digit tariffs or 9% tariffs. They clearly have a lot of room to liberalize trade. The U.S. Clearly has legitimate complaints on a number of issues, but a lot of these things can be handled if there's a sense of urgency. And as far as modernizing, that's what I'd say. I want to modernize the relationship with China. On Japan, I go back to when we thought we were going to do a free trade agreement with New Zealand. We tried to get New Zealand in with Australia, and I kept saying, let's just do it. It's, come on, it's not that going to be that hard. The dairy issue was a little bit there, but if you can't compete with a country that's 8,000 miles away, that pays high wages and has no subsidies, you might want to look at yourself first. And then that got caught up in the TPP, and now it's almost 15 years later, and we still don't have a free trade agreement with New Zealand, a country that everybody likes. And so sometimes I do think we get too grandiose in our ideas, and sometimes an FTA. Japan is a big deal. It's the third biggest economy. Caterpillar benefited because we got zero tariffs in Japan as part of the GATT, or the Uruguay round, which took a lot of, made it a lot easier to export there and what have you. But there is a lesson to be learned that sometimes we always shoot for the great and not the good, and we always want to be as comprehensive as possible, and we don't get anything. Lastly, and this is the one thing I leave you with, it's football season, you're going to be watching a lot of games, and a lot of you know I've been I do a lot with Penn State, and I've seen football games where you win with defense, and I've seen football games where you win with offense. But I have never seen a game in my entire life where you win with defense while you have the offense on the field, or you win with offense when you have the defense on the field. At least for the next year or so, we're going to be on defense, which means we've got to be aggressive in defending what we've accomplished. There will be a time where we can go on offense, and maybe that's sooner than later. But we've got to remember that two things. One, you got to have the right people on the field, and that gets back to the right people in administration. And two, you got to be on the field. And for too long, too many of the good guys and gals have not been on the field. We've got to change that with the new year.
Just to throw two things out that haven't been covered. It's been a great panel. One is Syria. We need to resolve the Syria crisis. The refugee crisis is destabilizing Europe. It's causing an incredible rise of nationalist parties in Europe. Europe is weakening as we speak. Our great trading partners and our great allies in the West and the global system. I personally believe that Putin went into the Middle East as aggressively as he did to keep the Syria conflict going. I mean, he has no actual, real strategic gains to be made. Does Putin really want to align himself with the Shia in the region when the Sunnis control virtually everything? The geopolitical play here is to keep the war going, to keep the refugee crisis going, to achieve his ultimate end, which is to weaken Europe. Right? And I think we have to, all of us, I think, recognize that Europe is weakening, and whatever we can do domestically to create a more sophisticated dialogue around this and connect the dots is important. And then the second piece is that, and I'll just throw this, well, I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to say the second piece is that the issue of every PowerPoint and every meeting you have, somehow we have to start with the notion that over the last 70 years, this global system that our country built, right, has created more prosperity and more peace and more progress than any time in human history. And we have to own that, right? I mean, our country, the great gift that we gave to the world was a global system where opportunity was possible. And we have done a terrible job at defending the dramatic gains that have happened in every measure, right? On poverty, life expectancy, trade levels, and all these things. On the aggregate, right, trade is good. The system is good. Do we need to do things to make it better for us here at home? Of course. But I think that there's far too much negativity in the public discourse, even in the media, right, about the extraordinary achievements that we've all been part of. And as Bill pointed out, we're going to have to fight really hard, I think, the next couple of years to make that case.
Well, as we close today, I would just like to thank our expert panelists. This truly has been an engaging conversation. And as we all go forward, I'd like to just take a few things that came out. We need to remain on the global playing field. And all of us today with this excellent conversation, not only proud globalists, but facts about globalization would be my hashtag. So let's join me in thanking our panel today.
Thanks to Audrey for your terrific job moderating the panel. Thank you to all the panelists. Very grateful for your being here. Thank you for helping spur a conversation that I think can't end today. I mean, literally, this is one part of the beginning of a new conversation about trade. WIDA hopes all of you will come to us with your ideas. We understand, Bill, we need to be on defense. We also want to find out those things that we need to do that are not offensive, but taking the initiative to lead the conversation about how we make trade a key part of the growing economy, how we help with workforce issues, supply chain issues, and all the other things that go infrastructure that are part of the broader conversation about the global economy and who's part in it. Thank you all.
Thanks, gentlemen. Go fight winning, gentlemen.